You have a choice at this point as to how you want to engage with the principles. There are 5 CTML design principles in the extraneous cognitive load. The first is coherence, which is the idea that you only include those elements needed to meet the learning objective in a video. That means no extra visual elements, and in many instances that means no music. There are some exceptions to the use of music. It's appropriate when it's needed to meet the learning objective of the video. For example, teaching about harmony, you would include music demonstrating harmony. That would be a coherent use of music. But for most people, I would encourage you not to add music just for music's sake. So now I'll ask you, what percentage of instructors reported in the data that their best self-made video did not have music? The answer was 90%. And further, the remaining 10% reported some of the time, which was the lowest option they could pick. So this is actually really good implementation of the first part of the coherence principle. The interviewees identified 2 main reasons why they did not use music in their videos, which you can see here on the screen. They felt it was inappropriate, and they had some barriers that were preventing them from doing so. The key takeaway for you, if you're new to creating instructional video, is to avoid using music unless you need it for a specific instructional purpose. There's a second component of coherence, and that's the visuals. So I ask you again to guess, what percentage of instructors reported that their best self-made instructional video had extra visual elements included in their video? Approximately 1 in 4 instructors were using extra visual elements. So while 75% or so were not, there's still a decent number that are. Again, there's 2 themes that the interviewees identified as helping them apply this design principle. One was a focus on being a teacher instead of an entertainer, and keeping their communication as concise and to the point as they could to benefit their students. The other was the use of an editing process to keep their video focused. Editing could take place before recording or after, but the key idea is that these individuals engaged in a review of what they created and made adjustments to ensure the message was focused and to the point. Most of the editing that the interviewees did was to remove items and elements. One of the interviewees, George, used formulas to help him stay focused and concise in his video communication. You see 2 examples of formulas that he used here on the screen. The one on the left should be fairly familiar, and the one on the right he used for videos that he makes out in the world. He calls those field videos, where he's out somewhere and he sees something related to what he teaches in class. He'll pull out his cell phone and he'll start filming. The key takeaway for you as a video creator is to use that review and edit process during your video creation with the goal of remaining concise and clear, and to consider using a formula to help you meet those goals. The next principle is signaling, and this is when an instructor uses highlighting for important information in a video. Signaling can take many forms, including outlining, underlining, color changes, shapes, vocal cues, highlighting, cursor movements, finger pointing, and other types of changes that draw viewer attention. What percentage of instructors applied the signaling principle in their best instructional video? Take a guess down below. So 52% said yes to that question, and 47% said they were not. So only about half of instructors were applying signaling principles. However, when I asked that question via a Likert question, 76% said yes in varying form. So depending on how I asked the question is getting at some different answers. I'd prefer to go with that 76% as it's a little more detailed of a question, and it certainly makes instructors look a little better. But still, this is definitely an area for improvement. So add in some signals, whether they be vocal cues, pointing finger, shapes, or colors. It's a relatively easy thing to do when you're creating video. You just have to remember to do it. How many of you like it when the person presenting reads the text on the slide back to the audience? This type of presentation style can feel awkward and uncomfortable. One of the reasons why is that your brain is trying to do 2 things at once that both use very similar processing channels. So the redundancy principle is when text is presented on the screen only. It is not read aloud by the narrator. So as a video creator, information is either spoken or presented on the screen, but not both at the same time. And I'd hope the reason for that is clear based on what I just did. So how many instructors do you think read aloud on-screen text in at least 30% or more of their best video? Take a guess down below. Well, 55% of the sample were reading on-screen text in 30% or more of their video. In this instance, the interviewees definitely provided some explanations that helped explain this principle's application. As I mentioned, interviewee George creates field videos of himself out in that real world. That type of video doesn't have any text on the screen, which makes it impossible for him to violate this principle. Hence the idea of the first theme, that visual design is going to inform how well this principle is applied. Now, another one of my interviewees, Bertha, has a quote that helps explain the next two themes related to this principle. She said, "I don't read as many words off the screen as I used to. However, sometimes if it's one of those phrases that's up there that's powerful, I will read it because I feel like it needs to be reinforced, not just by being there visually for the students, but by them hearing it spoken out loud." So a need to signal important information may be causing some additional redundant reading. The spatial contiguity principle is when related words and images are close together in a video. Here are two examples from the video artifacts. Now I ask you again, what percentage of instructors applied this principle in their best self-made instructional video? Take a guess. So what you see on the screen is a crosstab of the two questions about this concept. So 79% of instructors said yes on the dichotomous question, but got a little murkier with the Likert scale question, whereas only 71% said half the time or more. And the qualitative data didn't help explain this principle further because George didn't use on-screen text in his video. Two others were explaining assignments, so they didn't use images, and the visuals and text together were extremely limited in the other two videos. But my key takeaway for you as a video creator is if you use images and text in combination, keep them close to each other. And a bonus takeaway, I think instructors should consider using more images. Related to the spatial contiguity principle is the temporal contiguity principle. And this is when images appear at the same time as they are being discussed by the narrator. So what percentage of instructors do you think incorporated spoken audio at the same time as related images in at least half of their video? Take a guess. As you can see in this graph, with most of the responses pushed toward the right, 75% of instructors self-reported that they were incorporating spoken audio at the same time as related images in more than half of their videos. A common technique discussed by the interviewees was to show an image or graphic and then talk about it, which is exactly what I'm doing. And that's also your key takeaway for this concept. If you have an image, and I hope you do, when it comes up on the screen, talk about it. This will also help with the coherence principle. So there you have it, the 5 principles that fall under the extraneous cognitive load. To recap quickly, coherence, don't use music, be concise via editing and formulas. Signaling, add some signals. Redundancy, do not read on-screen text. Spatial contiguity, when you use images or graphics, keep them close to the associated text. And finally, temporal contiguity, when you show an image or graphic, talk about it.